Hi class, welcome to Friday's lecture on confidentiality. Throughout the week, we were looking at the many flavors of autonomy. Specifically, we discussed three sub-principles or duties that fall out of respect for autonomy. Informed consent, providing enough information for patients to make informed decisions. Truth-telling, providing again information to patients, again, to inform decision making. And today we'll be talking about confidentiality, when information should be withheld from people other than the patient and the medical team. So class today will be structured as follows. We'll be going over confidentiality. What is it? What are the limits of it? How to do it well? What are three rules of thumb to follow? Then we will be discussing arguments for and against confidentiality. And finally, we have two case studies, one on the Fitbit and whether or not privacy should be protected, and one on COVID-19 and whether or not confidentiality should be in place when we're trying to address a pandemic. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Okay, so let's get started. So as I said, with this week's recap, autonomy, and we were looking at truthfulness, confidentiality today, and informed consent on Monday. So we will be finishing up or wrapping up this more nuanced discussion of what the principle of autonomy entails in a medical context. So on Wednesday, we discussed truth-telling and why truth-telling is important. To ensure that we're imparting the information to patients that is necessary for them to both understand their conditions, the treatments, etc., and to provide them enough information to make decisions. Now today we'll be talking about the reverse side of the coin. If we flip the coin, the other side of truth-telling is confidentiality. And while truth-telling involves imparting information to patients, confidentiality involves patients imparting information to healthcare professionals. But it also includes, and here's the normative element, the promise that these professionals will not disclose this information to others. So we have patients feeling comfortable enough to provide the information necessary to provide medical care. So why is this important? Well, according to the American Medical Association, confidentiality is key to practicing medicine effectively, right? To pull a quote directly from their guidelines, the information disclosed to a physician by a patient should be held in confidence. The patient should feel free to make a full disclosure of information to the physician in order that the physician may most effectively provide needed services, end quote. So the American Medical Association is upholding confidentiality as a key component of biomedical ethics and medical practice today. Now, confidentiality, as you saw, is one of the core duties of medical practice, and it requires that healthcare providers both keep a patient's personal health information private unless consent to release the information is provided by the patient. So all information provided depending on, there are certain limitations, but we'll talk about those. But for the most part, all information that a patient provides is private unless the patient gives consent to provide it to other parties. Now let's kick the tires a bit. How far does this confidentiality go? Can we impart information to other medical professionals? What about the patient's family? What about the police? There are issues with the safety of another person. How far does this confidentiality go? Well, first we'll look at the obligation of confidentiality, and then we'll sort of test the limits of confidentiality itself. So the obligation of confidentiality prohibits the healthcare provider from disclosing information without permission, which is what we just discussed. But it also encourages providers to take active precautions to ensure that only authorized access occurs. And so in addition to the basic mandate to not disclose information, it The principle of confidentiality also includes a mandate to take steps to ensure that others cannot access said information. Now, it is true that appropriate care often requires information about patients be discussed among the members of a healthcare team, typically are not being treated by simply one person in a medical context. So it should be noted that all team members typically have authorized access to confidential information. However, this also means that all members of medical teams assume this duty of confidentiality to protect patient information, right? So we have this prohibition against disclosing information. We have this mandate to take steps to ensure that the information is protected, and this is particularly cogent in healthcare systems and in health insurance contexts, right? But we also recognize that medicine is very much a team endeavor. And as such, the team can disclose information, but the team is also held to these requirements. Now, I do have 3 points to remember, a video just highlighting some quick and easy rules of thumb to remember when you're working with patients and thinking about confidentiality.
Confidentiality is a key component of the patient-physician relationship. Patients who believe that their health information will remain confidential are more likely to provide doctors with more accurate information, which in turn will lead to better medical advice. Here are 3 things you cannot forget about confidentiality. 1. Most breaches are inadvertent. You may encounter a particularly challenging case that you want to share with your colleagues. That is okay, as long as you don't disclose information that can reasonably lead to the identity of the patient, like name, initials, prominent family members, or occupation, if unusual. You should also refrain from sharing cases on social media, especially those who might be on the news, as you can easily lose control of who sees this information once posted. 2. Confidentiality applies to individuals, not families. It is not uncommon for physicians to care for multiple family members. This can be very rewarding, but also fraught with ethical dilemmas. What if your patient asked you why you prescribed birth control pills to her 15-year-old daughter? Or what if you received a request from an insurance company for your patient's family history after you recently diagnosed his father with coronary artery disease? With few exceptions, you can only disclose medical information with your patient's implied or express consent, and the information disclosed should have been collected directly from that patient. 3. There are exceptions to confidentiality. The law recognizes specific situations where you need to disclose information for the greater public good. An example of mandatory reporting is when you suspect that a child is in need of protection. There are also situations where it is permissible for a physician to report to a governmental agency. For instance, in the situation in which a patient demonstrates to you that he or she will likely inflict serious harm on a specific person or group of persons.
Okay, so we covered 3 potential rules of thumb to think about or remember when you're thinking about confidentiality in medical contexts. I want to briefly go over a few of the ethical arguments for adopting confidentiality. In fact, there has been an argument that confidentiality, like truth-telling, should be seen as an additional principle rather than simply an offshoot of autonomy. So here are some arguments for adopting this principle. There are consequentialist arguments, and remember that consequentialism deals with consequences. And this is the argument that the American Medical Association puts forth, that unless patients can rely on their care provider to keep their secrets, they're probably not going to reveal information, or they may not reveal information that's necessary for their care. So in order to ensure that you are providing effective care, confidentiality helps. You need to follow the principle of confidentiality because it helps ensure that the environment is safe enough for patients to feel like they can provide sensitive information. So thus, without confidentiality, care providers would have a hard time fulfilling their duty of beneficence. It'd be very difficult to benefit a patient to the maximal amount and to increase their welfare if certain key information is not provided. In addition, the trust also makes practicing possible, would break down, harming the profession. Sorry, I had a frog in my throat, so to speak. So, confidentiality also helps build trust in the medical profession in general. It's seen as a place where you can go to discuss sensitive information, and you know that that information is not going to be leaked or provided to social media or given to your family if you're worried about that information being given to your family, etc. So, in addition to ensuring that medicine can be practiced as efficiently as possible, it also helps protect a trust in the medical profession in general. In addition, breaking confidentiality could open up patients to a wide range of discrimination. So justice comes in here, right? So from insurance companies to employers, etc. And this could be seen as breaking non-maleficence or doing no harm. So imagine if a person was diagnosed with a disease that has a social stigma attached to it. And if employers found out about the status of their employee, they could use this as a reason to discriminate against said employee, right? And this would be problematic. It would actively harm the patient. So you could see it as ensuring that beneficence is applied to the maximal degree and as a way to limit any sort of breaking of non-maleficence or do no harm. There are also non-consequentialist arguments to consider when we're thinking about confidentiality. So you could argue that not respecting the confidentiality or privacy of a patient breaks autonomy, as autonomous persons have the right to determine what happens to them. And by providing information to others, which could negatively harm them, you are taking this ability away from them. They no longer have the ability to provide the information to others in the way that they desire to provide said information to others. Therefore, they have a right to control access to the sensitive information concerning themselves. And this is how confidentiality is connected quite squarely to autonomy, right? You're taking away a person's ability to actively choose how information is being disclosed. And remember Rachel's from the discussion on euthanasia, also discusses confidentiality quite clearly, and he looks at the larger social implications. And he argues that privacy concerns, they typically move beyond issues of discrimination and embarrassment. There's actually another component here, and consequences. There's an entirely different, another component that's not typically discussed, but that should be placed on the table. And that's that privacy is necessary to maintain social relationships that we have with others. Being able to impart sensitive information to others in specific ways could help maintain these social relationships. So to manage these relationships, we need to have control over who has access to the information that could interfere with these relationships and how information is being imparted. So for all of us, when, how, and if we tell information to others is important. And again, this is connecting it to autonomy. Right? By not respecting confidentiality, you are taking away the patient's choices concerning when, how, and if they provide information to others. And this could in turn impact their relationships. How many of you have experienced information being shared on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or whatnot, but a social media platform? How many of you have experienced that information being shared when you weren't ready to have it shared, and how that could have negatively hurt your relationships? And Rachel thinks that we should very much take that type of harm into account. All right, so that was a rough and ready, very quick discussion of confidentiality, and we have plenty of time to talk about the two case studies. Now, I do want to show you the two case studies so that you can discuss them, and I did add closed captioning, so this will help.
Fitbits have taken the world by storm. If you've got one, chances are you can't leave the house without it. Obsessed with checking your daily steps, how long you've slept, or your heart rate during that cardio sesh? Well, there's a whole lot more to that thing on your wrist than you think. Let's dive deep into this hot fitness craze. Here's the untold truth of the Fitbit. Chillax. More and more people are finding new ways to slay that Fitbit life, but lots of people are going beyond using them just for getting into physical shape. When BuzzFeed writer Becky Barneycoat needed help managing her chronic stress, she decided to use a Fitbit to monitor her heart rate, marking when stress was starting to build so she could head it off at the pass. And it worked! Users have also found that Fitbit reveals not just the inner workings of our body, but our emotions too. One user's Fitbit even tracked the precise nuance of heartbreak when he broke up with his boyfriend.
Don't remind me. I miss it so much.
Bun in the oven. A man named David Trinidad took to Reddit to post about how his wife's Fitbit kept registering a strange higher than normal heart rate. He wondered if it was starting to malfunction and asked if anyone had any ideas on what could be wrong and how to fix it. But another Reddit user suggested that there might be another cause. His wife could be pregnant. And she was. According to Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, one of the telltale signs of pregnancy is an increased heart rate to match your body's increased need for blood, typically increasing the heart rate by 10 to 15 BPM. According to Fitbit, this was the first ever product pregnancy reveal, but they weren't too surprised since the heart rate tells so much about a person's health. Legally bombed. When you have a conversation with your doctor, you're protected by patient privacy laws. But that's not true with the Fitbit. In 1996, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act was launched to secure insurance and healthcare data. But things like the Fitbit, not covered. In one case, a San Francisco cyclist had GPS data from a fitness tracking app he was using taken as evidence in his own vehicular manslaughter trial. The data was used to help prove he was at the incident in question and going above the area speed limit, and he was ultimately convicted. Fitbits, like pretty much every other smart device you carry with you every day, are constantly collecting data about you and your life, and your every move is recorded when you're wearing one of those things. All this goes to show that info just isn't as private as you'd probably like to think. On the other hand, Fitbits can also be used for good. That's the whole point, right? Lifesaver. In 2016, one man's Fitbit literally saved his life. When he was admitted to a hospital in New Jersey with an irregular heartbeat, doctors weren't sure what was up. Was it a chronic problem or one brought on by a seizure? If they treated the wrong condition, he could die. And if they didn't treat him? So they grabbed his Fitbit and his phone, looked up his recent history and heart rate, and were able to do the right thing and save the man's life, resetting his heart rate with electrical cardioversion. The case made it into the annals of emergency medicine, giving doctors reason to take note of the life-saving potential of the Fitbit in a whole new way. Then again, no one, doctors included, should think the Fitbit is an infallible piece of technology. Case in point, heartbreaker. In 2016, Fitbit was hit with a class action lawsuit claiming that the heart rate tracker was imprecise, and dangerously so. According to some claims, Fitbits were anywhere from 25 to 78 beats per minute wrong. Fitbit answered, saying that they stand by their technology as is and are prepared to go to court to defend it, adding, Fitbit trackers are designed to provide meaningful data to our users to help them reach their health and fitness goals, and are not intended to be scientific or medical devices. Little Big Brother. Think your wellness habits are your little secret? Think again. Back in 2015, a Swiss insurance company announced it would kickstart a tracking program called MyStep, which gave reduced rates to regular Fitbit users. Their logic? The more often people's Fitbits hit 10,000 steps a day, the healthier they are. Conversely, if customers didn't step it up or just skipped out on the MyStep program, they'd be slammed with some hefty insurance premiums. But those people weren't the only ones getting monitored through their Fitbits. According to an article in The Guardian in fall of 2015, the Oral Roberts University required their students to suit up with the tracker. If their activity levels dropped too low, their grades would drop too. By way of an explanation, University President William Wilson told The Guardian, the marriage of new technology with our physical fitness requirements is something that sets ORU apart. We were the first university in the world to offer this unique approach to a fitness program.
What are you people? On dope?
Even though no GPS trackers were enabled on those Fitbits, they were still recording student data 24/7. It might have been called whole person education, but that invasion of privacy might need to step back. Dirty laundry. In 2011, Fitbit users got a major shock. Not only were their online profiles made public by the devices by default, but a quick Google search could allow you to find pretty much anyone's information. That included not just how active you or your neighbors were, but also information about exactly what you were doing. Users found their entries on the internet for all to see, some of which revealed things like sexual activity, active, vigorous efforts.
One little and I'm a hooker with no taste.
After news of the debacle hit the web, Fitbit quickly changed users' default settings to private and reached out to search engines to remove sensitive data. But there were more problems ahead. In January 2016, some Fitbit users got hacked by cyber thieves, trying to order replacement Fitbits items through the users' warranties. Users quickly realized hackers had also gained access to their sleep schedules and regular workouts. Stalker much? A month later, things got even scarier. Researchers from the University of Toronto took a look at just what information was being broadcast by a number of wearable fitness trackers, including the Fitbit. They found that almost every one of them emitted a constant Bluetooth signal that could be picked up and tracked. They also found the information the trackers were sending could be used on the spot by retail stores and shopping centers to profile customers as they walked in the door. That's just creepy. Fatness tracker. It's safe to say that most people who wear a Fitbit want to boost their health, but several studies have shown that some people report their weight heading in the other direction.
Okay, so this basically illustrates how our health data, while it is protected in medical contexts, may not be protected, and indeed is often not protected in the public sphere. So one of the things that you could discuss online and with your peers is that, would you wear a Fitbit, and what are the benefits and harms associated with wearing the Fitbit? Should Fitbit data be protected under the principle of confidentiality? Should medical procedures concerning confidentiality be extended beyond the clinical context proper? And Siegler, one of the readings that we discussed throughout the week, argues that high technology healthcare involves a wide range of specialists, medical, financial, governmental, etc. And as such, confidentiality today is impossible. Do you agree with this statement? Why or why not? And should this be so? So these are some of the questions to discuss. Now, while confidentiality is standard practice, it can be broken for several reasons. It can be broken when disclosure, for example, is essential to avert the danger of others. Remember the harm principle. Your freedom ends at the tip of another person's arm, another person's nose, right? So in this situation and in certain other situations, confidentiality is not absolute, but can be broken by medical professionals, and indeed should. And the American Medical Association recognizes two exceptions to confidentiality. Concern, when you have concern for the safety of other specific persons. You have a duty to protect individuals from any serious, credible threat of harm if you have information that could prevent this harm, right? So that is one clear-cut exception to the principle of confidentiality in medical contexts. The second one includes the legal requirements to report certain conditions or circumstances. So state law here often requires that certain communicable infectious diseases that could impact public health should be disclosed to public health authorities. And in these cases, the duty to protect public health is seen as outweighing the duty to maintain a patient's confidence. And this is particularly interesting because this second exception has been in the news quite a bit lately, and people have been discussing whether or not this should be the case when we are trying to address a pandemic. So I have a final video, and I will add this one online so that you can watch it. But the government is using, not the US government, I believe other governments around the world are currently using apps to help identify people who potentially could be infected with COVID. Are these apps different from fitness apps? Should we always respect the right to privacy and confidentiality? And what are some reasons why we shouldn't? And how do you weigh in on this exception too? Should this be upheld, or is this a highly problematic exception, right? An unwarranted exception to the principle of confidentiality? Should tracking be used? And whether you say yay or nay here, how should technology be used to limit pandemics? And finally, would you use this app? Why or why not? So these are other questions that you could raise in the discussion forum. Important questions concerning confidentiality. And I have many other cases too. All right, so that's it for confidentiality. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. I hope that you found this information useful, and I am looking forward to reading your discussion posts. Take care. Have a good day.